Hello, my name is Alistair. We've all heard how agile teams are supposed to be collaborative, cross-functional, self-organizing and autonomous. Therefore, the obvious question is, well, what is the role of leadership in all of this? And actually, leadership is incredibly important in agile. In my experience, the reluctance that leaders have towards agile is due to the perceived lack of governance, transparency and control. What we're going to look at in this presentation is how governance works in an agile context. And what we're going to discover is that in fact governance is far more robust when we apply it to the agile world. The reason for this is that governance is actually built in. We're going to look at this through planning, we're going to look at budgeting, and of course reporting and forecasting. And what we're going to see is that risk and waste is massively reduced and that value and revenue are significantly increased when we apply agile methodology and in fact an agile mindset. So first of all, let's look at planning. We say that planning should be continuous and responsive to change. When I was first learning about agile, I was obviously looking for all the information I could, and I was on a train coming home from London one evening, and a couple of guys got on and they were chatting and one of them was very animated. He was telling the other about how his team, his company was moving to agile, and my ears pricked up. I wanted to learn more. And then he said something which was really quite upsetting. This guy said, "It's fantastic. With agile, there's no planning." Well, that's just not true. We do a lot more planning when we work with agile, and let me show you. With a traditional plan-driven method, what we have is we do all of that planning up front before we sign off and decide to invest in a project. And then with that Gantt chart that we have and that very detailed list of requirements, we then hang on to that really for dear life, hoping that we're going to deliver that value 6 months to 2 years later. But the problem is that no plan survives contact with the enemy because we're surrounded by complexity, ambiguity, and things are always changing. In fact, the very moment we start our project, things started to shift around us. The sand shifts beneath our feet, and we need a process and we need the right people to allow us to handle that as we go through our project. If we don't do that, what we will find is that with waterfall, value is only delivered at the very end of the project. When we have finally completed absolutely everything, before we release it, it's got to be absolutely a finished, done thing. And that's when we see the value. And the problem with that is that we therefore aren't able to mitigate our risk until the very, very end as well. And it stays high throughout with that method. With Agile, which is an iterative incremental method rather than a plan-driven method, what we do is we invest, we go through those same steps, but we do those over a 2 to 4 week period, a very short period of time. And then we release those features and we deliver value early and we deliver it often. What we do is we will continue to go through that process, that iterative process, until we have delivered enough value. What we suggest is we should always start small. We should realize value early. We should release the budget in increments. And hopefully, when we are finished, we take a team which is now performing really well and we can put them onto another project so that we don't lose all that fantastic momentum. That means that when we're looking at Agile compared to Waterfall, we expect to be delivering all that value very nice and early. And we expect to mitigate and minimize risk because we're getting very early feedback from our users, from our customers, from our stakeholders on the project because they're actually seeing what is going on. So instead of a detailed plan, what do we have? Well, what we need is a very strong vision and then a high-level roadmap to give us an idea of where we're going. And this is an example from a real project that I was working on. And here was the plan for the next year. So we had a plan in there of what we were going to do in big chunks, big handfuls. But of course, things are bound to change. And in fact, within the first quarter, there was an announcement that the company was going to split in half. In fact, we were selling off half of the company. That meant that obviously a lot of the work that we had done now under a traditional method would have been wasted and we'd have to start all over again. Because we were agile, there was absolutely no problem. There were two new bits, major pieces of work that we had to include. One was a rebrand of the portal, and another one was a code split so that we could give half the code, give the code to both sets of companies. But it was just not a problem to fit this in, because we knew that we could actually change this plan to adapt to the changing circumstances. So with governance, what are we actually trying to control? Well, typically the iron triangle here, scope, time and cost, are fixed. That's what we're trying to do, because we're trying to control risk, performance and quality. And what we're looking for, of course, is certainty. But as we know, everything changes. So what gives on this triangle? If we try and keep to this triangle, what happens is quality is what suffers. With an agile methodology, quality does not suffer, because instead of hanging on to scope here, what we do is we focus on value. And what we're doing is we are solving for the complexity and handling the ambiguity and the change as it's happening. So we're actually able to control all those things far better within an agile framework. Let's look at this in a little bit more detail then. Let's imagine that we want to create Microsoft Word from scratch. Typically what we would do is we would write down a list of the requirements, everything we could possibly think of, and then we would go into a tremendous amount of detail to work out exactly what we're going to deliver. And what we will then do is we will build this product based on a number of potential criteria, as you can see on here. What we do with Agile is we take that same list of features that we want to deliver, but instead of going into minute detail on everything, we focus our efforts on what we're going to do first. We decide that based on value, with an eye on size and risk, the size of a particular feature and how long it's going to take to make and the risk elements involved. And interestingly, if we're looking at things like security and architecture, those should be part of this product backlog. They're not separate from that. They should be in here, and typically architecture and security high up in the first few sprints that we'll be working on. So what we then do is we would actually take that those first few stories, those first few features, and we will take those into the sprint backlog and start delivering them. In the meantime, we can see that we would add new items as we learn from the outputs that we're going through. We can see here that we would reprioritize items, and we are not afraid of doing that. And the other thing is that as we go through, we start to refine these items as we go through this product backlog. And we mustn't be afraid of an important thing, which is to delete items. In fact, this is one of the fascinating things I find about Agile, is that we never expect to deliver everything that we started off with in that product backlog. That we don't expect to deliver all the features that we first imagined. We expect things to change. So if we look at this product backlog in the format of a product roadmap, here we have those same epics and so forth. And this is looking at one particular team that was building this. What we notice here is that epic number 4 was moved out towards the end of the project, because there was an incredible amount of complexity in that, and we thought it was far better to focus on delivering value to the users. These were all internal users, delivering value to them early, and we could then, once they were actually up and running with all of this, we could then focus on that. We deleted epic number 7 roughly around the time we were about to deliver epic number 2. We realized that actually we had delivered most of the features that we wanted for 7 within the first 2 epics, and so there was no need to actually go through that. And an epic is basically a group of features that we are delivering. And then we had this idea of a cutoff. As we moved through the project, we started to look at these last few epics in some detail, and realized that the savings that we would make from delivering those features was completely outweighed by the cost of actually building them. So that particular feature there, that group of features there, the manual cost of doing that on a yearly basis was about 2 man days per year. and it was going to take us about 2 months to build that feature. So, and that's a whole development team working on that. So it just didn't feel like it was practical, that it was good use of money to carry on doing that. So we stopped this project early. Something that we get used to with Agile, of course, is that we don't deliver everything. As I said earlier, we don't try and deliver everything that we first originally thought of. One of the great things with governance and why it works so well with Agile is visibility. The project that we do through Waterfall, we sign it off and then we receive milestone reports which are designed to keep us at bay until the very end when we see the big reveal as to whether we have what we expected. With Agile, we're looking at this project on a continuous basis, and we can see the output and we can test that with our customers. If we look at the Scrum framework, just as an example, we have here the product backlog, which we've looked at, and we take that into a sprint backlog. And what we have is visibility. We as seniors should be in constant conversation with the product owners so that we actually know what is going on within this at all times. We have access to the dashboards, the Kanbans and so forth, so we know what's going on within the team throughout that 2 to 4 week sprint. And we are expected to attend the sprint review where we actually get to see the end result of that 2 weeks of work, and we can actually see that. And what we'll find is that this team is looking forward to having us in there because they are proud of what they've achieved, and they want to show it off, quite frankly. They want to show us that actually what they're doing is really good and it's real value. So we inspect the end results after 2 weeks, and then we work with the product owner to make any adaptations that we need to this input process as we go through the project. So planning then, continuous and responsive to change. So what about budgeting? Well, there are two main concepts here. One is it should be based on reality, not on estimates. And the second is that it should be iterative and incremental. We humans are incredibly poor at estimating cost and time of things that we've never done before. If we've done it loads of times, we can get good at that. But then we're using empirical evidence to support us. What we are good at is relative sizing. We're good at saying that will take longer than this. We're good at saying this will cost more than that, but not really at getting the detail down. The other thing we're incredibly bad at is predicting the future, but we can learn from empirical evidence. And just to show some statistics on this, it is said that when we are looking at the beginning of a project, we can be out by a factor of 4 in our prediction as to how much something's going to cost, or how many features we need, or how much effort is required. What we do then is we try and plan this thing to death so that we can actually minimize that variability. The thing is we haven't even started building the thing yet at this point. And what we often don't realize is that there is another cone of uncertainty, the other side of this project. And therefore, all this time here is invested, which is actually, as far as Agile is concerned, wasted time. What we should do is we should just start moving. They say you can't steer a parked car. We need to start moving with this project so that we can start learning, so that we can start developing and delivering what it is that we want to deliver. And so looking at the fourth major difference between Agile and Waterfall then is that ability to change, that ability to handle the ambiguity, to handle complexity, and to deal with the shifting environment that we have around us. If we look at that value slide, if I just fling back, if we look at this here for a second in a little bit more detail, what we discovered is that 20% of the features deliver 80% of the value. If you think about that Microsoft Word example from earlier, how many of those ribbons, or how many of the buttons on those ribbons do we actually use? Very few of them. What Agile says is deliver those first. Deliver that 20% first. And this is often what we mean by a minimum viable product. It's pretty much mostly most of the value that you need in the product. It's not something that has no value. The minimum viable product actually has most of the value. At this point, we can then decide, do we want to continue and deliver the rest of the features with ever decreasing returns for our effort, for our cost and our time investment? Or do we want to really reimagine where this product could be and actually invest the next period of time and the next amount of money on taking this to a whole new level? And we can continue to do that. The beauty is we decide when we have enough value, and we stop, and then we take that team and we put them onto another project that we want to start delivering. If we consider the cash flow then, here the waterfall cash flow, here the agile cash flow, what we have is we are basically, the risk is just lasting for such a long time with waterfall. We don't completely get rid of risk with agile, but we significantly limit it. And therefore, our budgets are safer. So how do we go about funding? So typically we're funding projects. Well, actually what we're doing with Agile is we're trying to move to the concept where we're funding teams or products, but we will start typically by funding releases. So we will work on that iterative incremental, releasing your budget as we go through the project, as those releases are coming. If we find that we're not getting any value out of something, then we can stop and we can direct all that money somewhere else. As trust increases, which is obviously based on empirical evidence, and as team autonomy increases, then we can move to funding products and eventually, hopefully, to funding teams, where we will actually take that team and move it on to project after project as they go through delivering. In this case, for example, release your budgets on a quarterly basis. Don't try and plan out for the whole year, but think of things in a shorter term. A quarterly is the example, and obviously iteratively and incrementally. So budgeting based on reality, not estimates, iteratively and incrementally released. Finally then, reporting and forecasting. What we're saying is this should be frequent, it should be lightweight, and it should be relevant. So we're all familiar with an executive dashboard like this, lands on our desk on a Monday morning and gives us a lot of information. Also takes a lot of time to be produced, and it's typically produced in a way that is trying to manage our expectations. What we have with Agile is the proof, the evidence, the measure of success, the measure of progress is that completed increment of the product or whatever it is that we are building. That's the proof. We see that by attending the sprint review. We don't need lots of graphs and charts to prove anything. There it is. Did it work? Is it of value? Will users buy it? That's the question. We do have a couple of reports that we keep, one based on an always reviewed, a well-reviewed and a kept up-to-date product backlog, and one based on something called team velocity. And these really are the two main and two probably only reports that we need. The first one looks something like this. We have here story points. So a feature becomes, we call it a story, and we allocate points based on how hard it's going to be to build that thing, and it's relative to other things. So this thing will take 5 points to do, that thing will take 10, and so on. But we have a total of the story points. With this particular example, I was working with 5 teams, and we were able to take the team velocity from 98 points per sprint up to 289 points per sprint, almost trebling the speed within 9 sprints. We did that through a process of continuous improvement. Every 2 weeks we had a retrospective. We would look at what we were doing, how we were doing it, and we would look at ways, and there are a number of things that we did to improve this velocity, but moving almost 3 times faster at the end of this particular period, and it went on from there. So that's the team velocity, really, really important, because we need that to know what we're going to do. And then the next thing then is, in this example, a burn-up chart. What this is looking again at the product backlog. I'm going to turn it upside down. It's looking at the product backlog, and what it's saying is these are the features that we're going to deliver, and this is how we're going to deliver them. This line here is the actual progress on another project that I was on, the actual progress that we had. And we were asked, well, when are we going to deliver a certain thing? When are the things going to be done? What we had was a cone of uncertainty. We had the worst case and the best case scenario. We knew what that was based on actual evidence. The question then was, well, what will we have delivered by, for example, Sprint 25? We knew that we would have something between those items that were delivered all the way up to point number 100, between there and 165. So somewhere between there and there, those features were what we're going to deliver. Well, what about when are we going to have that particular feature delivered there? Well, we can see that it will be somewhere between Sprint, I think 17 and Sprint 27. Somewhere between there was what we're going to do, when we're going to deliver it. Now, obviously, we would like to have a specific date on which we're going to get something. But I personally prefer the transparency that we get when we look at this cone. Because if we ask for a specific date, the chances are the date we're going to be given is going to be somewhere on the worst case scenario chart in order for our expectations to be managed. But by being able to look at this, we can then say, well, how do we get things closer to this green line? So if we just look here at this line that we're tracking, look what happened 2 sprints later. It jumped to there. It looked like it was starting to be a lot more consistent how that was tracking, how we were delivering these particular features. So what we were able to do is we were able to narrow that cone quite considerably, and we were therefore able to say, actually, we've got a new idea of what the worst and best case is going to look like. That meant that we could then change the answer to the question that was given to us earlier. We'd say now, actually, we think that we're going to deliver those items by the time we get to Sprint 25. And if you want to know when that will be delivered, we now believe it will be delivered somewhere between 16 and 17, which is, of course, a far better answer to what we had before. But by working together, we were able to understand how to increase velocity of the team in order to deliver a better answer and better outcomes all round. So hopefully we've seen that governance is more robust within an Agile framework. We've looked at these different elements and gone through it. We talked at the beginning however, leadership is incredibly important. For us to move from a bureaucratic mindset to an Agile mindset, we need to move our frameworks, but also the habits, the mindset and the behaviors of our teams. And we want to move them from waterfall to agile, and we want to move them from extrinsic motivation to autonomy, mastery and purpose in order for us to really see all the benefits that agile promises. And in order to do this, we need to think about our leadership. And what we want to do is we want to help our leaders move from a command and control mindset to an emotion intelligent, enabling servant leadership kind of mindset. And we will talk about that in more detail in a further video on this subject. So we'll give you some ideas there. Obviously, Agile is not one size fits all. This has been just the tips of the iceberg. And what will be good to do is to identify how we apply these principles and this mindset to your specific organizations. And if you'd like to find out more about that, if you'd like to discuss that with us, or if you'd like to ask any questions about anything that I've been through, please do get in touch. Talk to you soon.